Hi, this is John DeSouza at the Empowered Light Expo. What you're about to watch is my workshop, Hacking the Matrix, Becoming Para-Investigators. All about teaching people the skills and the exercises that they can go through in order to decipher reality, to hack this matrix of deception that is pulled over our eyes, so that we can practice and learn these skills to use them every day to find out what's really happening in all of our lives. This course is for truth seekers, police, mystery seekers, which we all are. And that's music. In an age of universal deceit, truth will be a revolutionary act. George, let me run through this. We're a little behind here.
Have you discovered Gaia.com yet? Stream the largest library of consciousness-expanding videos, ad-free and member-supported. See the links in the description below for more details and a special sign-up offer. Start your journey for only 99 cents.
About how evidence works. Limited physical.
A real investigator has to follow the clues no matter where they lead, and sometimes the place that leads can be very improbable and can be even non-physical. I did have a long career, 25 years, well, over 25 years at the FBI as a special agent investigator. And the main difference between investigations I would do at the FBI and the ones I do now is that in the FBI, you were allowed to investigate something, and no matter how paranormal it turned out to be, it had to be ended with a physical investigative conclusion. So, for instance, we had the 9/11, the Indigo kids of 9/11, well, which turned out to be a bunch of little kids all over the country that in the days before 9/11, they had prescient experiences of what was going to happen on 9/11 before it happened. And these kids were reported by caretakers, by school teachers, by school bus drivers, by, not by their parents, but by other people. And so FBI agents and cops with guns on had to go talk to these little kids, sometimes as young as 7 or 8 years old, who had these extraordinary experiences, these visions. And after all was said and done, every single one of those cases, we had to check to see if, maybe these kids heard something from adults, maybe they heard something from the family discussing the terrorist acts, and we had to make sure that that was not the case. Every single one of those cases were found to be no connection to terrorism. But then, that was it. We weren't allowed to do anything more with those kids because the physical explanation, that was it. That was as far as we were allowed to go. We're missing out on the development of our abilities, of our supernatural abilities, because agencies like the FBI and other investigative agencies don't develop these things, don't go beyond the physical conclusion of these investigative conclusions in these cases to really explore the supernatural aspect of what is going on. We lose what we could have been. We lose our own abilities to develop ourselves, and it's too bad. That's why we need to work on this amongst ourselves in an independent way, so that people who use supernatural abilities to save lives, instead of being excoriated, burned at the stake, that they are rewarded and developed, and that we use their wisdom to help us develop ours. Physical evidence is very important, but unfortunately, people, their understanding of what evidence is and what proof is and all that has basically been ruined by television. People now believe that the only things that really are evidence are anything you can get in a test tube, you can put a DNA sample, like CSI, and that is absolutely not true. Evidence means anything that just makes a proposition more or less likely to be true, including non-physical things. The moment that you know that there's something supernatural in a case, that there's something genuinely and authentically non-physical, metaphysical, paranormal in a case, is when you've exhausted the physical explanations and there's nothing in the physical explanations that account for what is happening. All paranormal phenomena is inherently unprovable by scientific standards. And that's just the nature of what it is. The medium will undo the message always, every single time. That's exactly why scientific realm is exactly the wrong place to throw in paranormal phenomena. It's never going to work. It doesn't work because by their own standards, they are purely materialist. They can only follow material data and material-based data. That's all they can do. So it's inherently, it's just not going to work. That's why you have to have investigators.
Para-investigation is a systematic inquiry or investigation that utilizes scientific methods initially, but then relies upon intuitive paranormal abilities to resolve crimes and mysteries. And one of the great secrets here is that when you see those old homicide detectives who are all grizzled and they seem really physical, they are using paranormal abilities. They are using their intuition, but they just can't talk about it. Stuff is based, most of this is based on my first book, The Para-Investigators, True Tales of Supernaturally Gifted Investigators. Investigators that some of us know about, but we don't know the whole story on it. This is for note takers. I have a desk out there. There's a sign up. You can just give me your email and I'll give you guys a PDF of this entire presentation, and you can get it and I will email it to you. You just have to write your email clearly, very clearly. That's on you. And I will be able to email you the PDF. You won't get the videos, but you'll get everything else. And that's for note takers, because I know a lot of people. And there's a lot of notes in this like this. True investigator process starts, and these are things that are based upon FBI process. FBI has been around since 1908, over 120 years it's been around. And these are the principles and processes that they have taught and that I have taught during my time in the FBI. Initial crime or mystery, you go to your, you go to your initial crime or mystery, you go to your preliminary process, then you go to your 5 S's of the first on the scene, first responders. You resist giving credence to anonymous sources. That's a big one. I struggled in the FBI with that for many, many years to get them to adopt this process. And tentative declaration of reliability of witnesses. The material investigative process is called PIDC. It is, PIDC, which stands for preliminary investigation, investigative follow-up, and blah, blah, blah. You'll get it in the notes. The 5 S's, the first on the scene, is first people on the scene have to seal the stuff, seal it. Whether you're talking about evidence, residue, witnesses, you seal it up. You separate it. You sample, you survey, and you take statements. One of the secrets here is that there's always witnesses. We're living in a complete surveillance society at this point. You think that there's no cameras? There are. There's smart witnesses, smart criminals who think, oh, there's no cameras in this area. There's always cameras somewhere. So this is the process that has to be followed. And one of the things is when you learn this, you can be at a police investigation. If you don't see these things being done, something's wrong. Something's wrong, either incompetence or maybe corruption. So that's what you have to look at. That's why it's important for civilians to learn this process and how it works. One of the great para investigators was in Olympic Park, Atlanta, Georgia, 1996. It was Richard Jewell, who was a man who became a great hero because he saved a lot of lives back in the Olympic Park, where there was a big party going on, and he was a person who found a suspicious package, and he did, well, we found out later, by his own admission, he did a remote viewing into that package, which he never touched, because all this is on camera. We had him on camera the entire time. He never touched the package, he never looked inside, but yet he started running around and flailing his arms and screaming at people, get out of the area, because they weren't listening to him. He set up a police barrier around the package, and people weren't listening to him, so he had to scream at them, get out of the area, because this could be a bomb. So what did the FBI do? What did the New York Times do? They ended up accusing him of being the bomber, because how else could he know? How else could he know that it was a bomb?
Welcome to Atlanta's Olympic Stadium for the opening ceremony of these Centennial Olympic Games.
In the early morning of July 27, 1996, more than 100 people were injured and one killed by a bomb blast at Atlanta's Centennial Olympic Park.
After the bombing had occurred, the victims were taken away. I remember very distinctly, as the light came up, I started meeting some of the people around in the area, and one of the people on the scene was Richard Jewell.
Jewell, a former sheriff's deputy, had discovered the bomb in a backpack and helped clear the area before the explosion. He was hailed a hero.
And I just hope that we catch the people that did it.
Following the bombing, there were a lot of suspects, but it wasn't too far into the investigation where Richard Jewell's name started surfacing.
The president of a college where Jewell had worked security called the FBI to say he had concerns about Jewell. A check into Jewell's background revealed other witnesses who reported he had a history of employment problems and was obsessed with law enforcement.
Everything that you just saw in the videos is basically lies. This documentary was made by the New York Times, who actually ended up losing millions in a libel slander lawsuit from Richard Jewell's family. Not only them, CNN and Atlanta Journal-Constitution, all the newspapers who went into this frenzy of accusing Jewell of being the bomber, they all were sued, and they acted successfully. And Richard Jewell's estate made millions and millions and millions from them in settlements. So what they're saying here, this whole documentary is a tissue of lies, and they ended up paying for those lies. Unfortunately for Richard Jewell, it didn't help him because this whole incident broke his health. That's why I called the story Death of a Broken Heart, Death from a Broken Heart, because he loved law enforcement, and the FBI betrayed him, fooled him, and accused him when the only thing he was guilty of was saving about 100 lives, and including children, because that park was filled with little kids, families with little kids, and if he hadn't done what he did, when the bomb exploded, it killed one person. But if he hadn't done what he did, it would have killed about 100 people, including little kids. So the man was a great hero, but this incident, he was accused for 88 days, and it was in every newspaper all around the world that he was a terrorist, and that he had killed people, or tried to kill people. And it broke his health, and he died at the age of 44 shortly after this. He died from heart disease and other things. And it's a terrible, terrible thing. It's really sad. So that really illustrates what I call the problem of fact gatherers, fact finders versus true investigators. Because those FBI agents who investigated him, they were not true investigators. They were fact gatherers. They were people who just, like scientists or analysts, which we have to work with, but they just gather facts. They don't do true investigation. And here's an example of what true investigators do, what fact gatherers do. In the police academies, they still teach motive, opportunity, and means. Mom. They teach mom. If you got mom on somebody, on a suspect, you got everything. That's it. You got everything. The problem is, we have found out that mom is, the motive part of mom is largely a lie. Motive doesn't really matter. And this is what we found out in the last 20 years. If you have opportunity and means, that's good enough. Get the suspect, do whatever you got to do, get the evidence. Motive, the problem is, we found out that the human mind is so complicated, it's not a machine. It's so complicated, it's so complex that motive doesn't really matter that much because you really can't decipher it for the most part in a lot of people. Because, for one thing, people are irrational. They're completely irrational. People will do things that make no sense at all. And then if you're there as an investigator saying, we gotta have motive on this person, then you end up with this kind of situation. You end up with this kind of situation where you have people pretending to be investigators who say things like, well, why would he lie? Why would he make that up? Here's a study that found a high percentage rate of false reports in assaults. And this is a very academic study, and it found a high percentage rate of false accusations. And what's wrong with these numbers is they should all be zero. They should all be zero. Why would there be any? What do you get to? Most of the people who did these false accusations, they had nothing to gain by doing these false accusations, so they didn't make sense. And that goes back to why motivation is the least important thing. Bad investigators or non-investigators always ask these terrible questions. Oh, why would a woman lie? Why would a child lie? Why would anyone just make things up that don't help them in any way? Why would anyone lie about their neighbors? These are red flags whenever you have an investigator or a counselor ask a question like this. It's a red flag that they don't know what they're doing. They absolutely don't know what they're doing because it doesn't make sense. Anybody here ever hear of the Menendez brothers? Okay, the Menendez brothers were two brothers who were involved in drugs and other things like that, and they wanted money. And their parents were rich. But the thing was, their dad had a terrible heart condition. He was already, if they wanted their inheritance, if that's what they were concerned about, their dad was in terrible health. He had gone in and out of hospitals. All they had to do was just sit back and wait a little bit, and their dad was going to pass away, and they would have had their inheritance. So it just didn't make sense that they decided to take two shotguns and blow their parents' face off, their dad's face off, in a very sloppy and ridiculous way. It's against life, and it's because of what I said. People are irrational. That's why we had Salem witch trials. That's why we had Joe McCarthy communist hunts. The Duke lacrosse case, where Tawana Brawley decided to say that the entire lacrosse team had raped her with no evidence that was of any use. The McMartin preschool trial. If you guys want to see the harm that can be done by counselors and other non-investigators, you look up the McMartin preschool trial. This was the most expensive trial in the history of Los Angeles County, and it ran for like 6 years. And so many people lost their careers of working with children, and all charges were finally dropped in 1990. It's an incredible story. And yet all kinds of teachers and principals and people who worked at this school all lost their careers. They lost their livelihood. They lost everything. And the school, of course, had to be shut down. And yet all charges were dropped. No real evidence was ever shown. All you had is a bunch of counselors sitting down with little kids, helping them make up stories about being touched and being led down tunnels and being taken to caves and crazy stuff. And that's what happens when you have bad investigators posing as real investigators. Here's one. Case studies, crimes. I hope nobody's going on a plane right now. This is something we found out on 9/11 for the first time. and a couple of you, I've discussed this with you before. We found out on 9/11 because we had so many planes crash at the same time. An anonymous FAA official said commercial airliners that crash have higher rates of passenger last-minute cancellations than planes that don't. Okay? You find out in retrospect that planes that crash have more empty seats, last-minute cancellations. There's a famous actor, a movie star, Mark Wahlberg, who on 9/11 he showed up at the airport. He had to get on a plane for an important trip, and he said once he said he had some terrible feeling in the pit of his stomach. He got cramps or something, and he just canceled his flight at that moment, and he just went home. And he doesn't talk about that anymore, and the reason is why? Because if bad investigators get a hold of this statistic and find out it's real, what are they going to say? What are they going to say about the people who cancel their flights? They did it. That's right. That's the reason why this cannot be publicized, to a large extent anyway, because of that. Real investigators would have a different, of course, real investigators who are, without our para-investigators, will have a different conclusion. We would say there's something spiritual going on here. These people are getting some kind of intuition. That's what's going on. So that's the difference between a true investigator and others. True investigators follow investigative clues no matter where they lead, even if they lead into something above normal, supernatural. But fact finders can't do that. They cannot do that. True investigators don't just say just the facts. They say, let's begin with the facts. Let's do the real investigation on the ground, but then let's see where else that takes us. Fact finders posing as investigators, very dangerous. When there's no material resolution, they go to the boyfriend-husband fallback. Boyfriend did it, husband did it. There's no evidence, but that's all we've got. Or the nearest ex-con or homeless guy did it. This was very notorious during the Soviet Union. Whenever there were crimes committed in the Soviet Union, they would just grab the nearest homeless person and just put him in the gulag and say, that's the guy who did it. Or the other one is accusing hero as perpetrator, the Richard Jewell case. Right there. Hero was there. He has opportunity. He has means. So let's accuse the hero as being the criminal. Best evidence rule. Best evidence is connection to human authenticity. It is not the bloody gun, not the smoking gun or the bloody knife. It is direct connection to human authenticity. Here are some, what we call paragons of authenticity throughout the years. This is Villalobos from Brazil, the case in 1957 of the young man who was abducted aboard a spaceship, and he was made to have sex with a female hybrid alien, and he was a peasant farmer at that time. He was just a 20-year-old kid, and after that, he went on to become one of the most prominent attorneys and successful attorneys in Brazil. And he was encouraged to go into politics. He was very, very successful. And until the day he died, he was given a lot of pressure to recant his story, his crazy story. And he never did till the day he died. Very famous person in Brazil. Betty and Barney Hill, of course, 1961, on the border of Massachusetts, New Hampshire. I think it was Route, I don't remember what route, but they were, again, two people that until the day they died, they maintained the veracity of every single detail of their story of abduction. Travis Walton, of course, is famous for having taken, like 10 or 20 polygraphs to show the truth, and always passed every polygraph. And that's a very well-known thing. Boyd Bushman, the scientist from Skunk Works, who was a guy who worked for all the big aerospace companies, who later advised that he had worked everything coming out of Area 51 and from the Roswell crash, and eventually went on to show pictures of dead alien grays that he's showing in this picture. He has a YouTube testimony up right now that you may be able to find, maybe. DeSouza's rule of reverse corroboration. When you have an institution that's known for public deception, then you have to assume what they're saying is false. And what those organizations, we may differ. For me, it's CIA. For me, it's NASA, who has not told us, who still hasn't told us why we stopped going to the moon in 1977. And they still haven't said anything about that. So that's my own opinion there. True investigators versus fact finders. These are the differences. Let's see. Here's some of the favorite sayings of fact finders. And fact finders is a positive thing. You know, judges and juries are fact finders. Scientists, analysts are fact finders. They're data miners, and they do an important job. They do an important job, but their job becomes screwed. It hurts us when they pretend like they're true investigators. Here's some stuff that fact finders, researchers, scientists, they love to say. Follow the data. Follow the data, but what they really mean is follow the material data to a strictly material conclusion. That's what they really mean. So that's the difference. Here's another big one. Great claims require great evidence. Great claims require great evidence. Well, that's not true, because then we would have no great claims anywhere. For instance, Thomas Edison claimed he could invent the light bulb based on 9,000 failed attempts. That was his evidence. He would never have been allowed to continue by a large corporation. Never. But he knew he could invent the light bulb, and he finally did it. You know, and that was his evidence for that. Here's another big one. Where is your evidence? Which really means prove this to me. Force me to believe. And when you have somebody approach you like that, you always have to, the best thing is always to walk away. Whistleblowers, informants, complainants, and subjects. These are methods in which you always have to do your own checks on whistleblowers and people who provide evidence. A real easy trick that I always tell people, I think I was discussing this with Jason Quitt recently, is that whenever you have somebody come forward, whistleblowers, you just take some of their unique phrases like, you know, when I do my presentation, I have lots of unique phrases that I give people. You take those and you use them as search strings. Go into like there's something called the Wayback Machine, and also on the internet, and you can search those word strings to see anybody else has used them. If so, was it somebody that was close to the whistleblower? Was it somebody that they were associated with in the past? You know, and then you can match up and you start to find out if their stuff is original or not. Is it stolen? Is it taken from somebody else, where they just took their ideas and just expanded it into their own thing? That's a really important one. Looking at this board right here, I would not question, I personally, and that's just my own way of being, I would not question the integrity of anybody on this board except this freaking group right here. Look at these guys. You know who they are? They're a bunch of former CIA and Department of Defense officials from the Pentagon who all have spent their lives deceiving the public. And then they retired one day, supposedly they retired one day before they appeared here on this stage, and then they said, oh no, now we're here to tell the truth about disclosure. And we're going to be helped by CNN and Fox News and all the mainstream media outlets, and we're all telling you the truth about disclosure. Okay, that's what we're going to do. So, to me, from my experience, these are the only guys that I absolutely am wary of, and unfortunately, they got this guy fooled, and he's doing whatever they want him to do. But that's what I would beware of as far as whistleblowers, very much so, because the real world doesn't work that way. It really doesn't. And here's some more methodologies for proving whether whistleblowers are telling the truth, whether their material is good or not. And I call it map the person and cuss the information. Map the person and cuss the information. So, for instance, the person, you examine motives. Why are they stepping forward? And you must have biodata, biographical data, to identify who they really are. Access. You examine their access. What was their access to this information? How did they get it? Was it personal, professional? Are their credentials real? And persona assessment. This is very big. This is all FBI procedure developed over the last 100 years, 120 years, basically. Is the person stable, reliable, consistent? And you have to do meaningful checks for previous crimes. Here's a trick here. If a whistleblower or anybody that's giving you information has previous crimes or bad acts that don't relate to honesty, that doesn't disqualify them. That doesn't disqualify them. Only if they have something that relates to honesty and truth-telling, then that's a disqualifier for that person. You know, if you have the guy from Les Miserables who stole a loaf of bread to feed his family, you know, then that doesn't really have any effect on whether they're telling the truth in their information. The other one is to cuss the information, which means you examine the credibility of the material, the unbelievability or believability, and that's a subjective standard, of course. The source of the medium, is it third-hand hearsay? Is it documented data on some reliable medium? Oh, and you survey the material. You vet the material. Again, doing the same thing, another layer of protection. You plug key phrases into search engines. Plug it in there. Do the searches and see where this language came from originally. One of the things I get questioned on a lot is that I will tell stories that are from my experiences with the government over many years, and people sometimes will come up to me afterward and they'll say, "Hey, we just searched," because it's like something really big, important historical story, like the Dog Walkers Rebellion of the Soviet Union, for instance. And the Dog Walkers Rebellion of the Soviet Union is something that I got from ethnic Russians who lived in the Soviet Union during the fall, which was late 80s, early 90s. And they told me about the Dog Walkers Rebellion, which was basically that the entire population about 1988, 1999, 1990, they all withdrew from the Pravda system of news in the Soviet Union. They basically started every evening, they had at 6 p.m., like Dan Rather in the evening news, they had Pravda news everywhere across the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was hundreds of millions of people over like 3 or 4 time spans. And it was everyone at 6 p.m. started going out to walk their dogs everywhere because they didn't want to hear the Pravda news. They didn't want to have anything to do with it. They knew it was all fake. And they didn't want to be exposed to it. So from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m., everywhere in the Soviet Union, everybody went to walk their dogs, and they started seeing each other. And they all said they were all out there for the same purposes, to avoid Pravda news in the evening. And so they started talking to each other, and they actually started exchanging news from the West. Because if you hear even a rumor from the West, it was more likely to be true than anything in Pravda news. So they started doing that, and that started happening. And they said towards the end, when the Soviet Union finally fell, I think it took like until 1991, and it was finally gone. Towards the end, they had warehouses filled with Pravda newspapers because nobody was reading them, no one was getting, even free. They gave them away for free, like CNN gives their stuff away for free at the airports and the gyms. You don't have to pay for it. They just give it away. Well, they had warehouses filled. At the end, the only people who were watching or getting Pravda newspapers were government officials and homeless people. And it's because homeless people used the newspapers to fill their clothing, to keep warm. That was it. So That's the dog walkers rebellion of Soviet Union. And we're going through that rebellion right now, hopefully, we are, where we're all withdrawing from all of this mainstream media and fake news, and instead, we're walking our dogs together. We're exchanging with each other what's really going on. And so we need to continue that. So I have people, sometimes they come up to me and they'll say, hey, we just wikied your Dog Walkers Rebellion. It's not anywhere. And he says, well, that's because my stuff is original. All my stories are original. When you plug my stuff into search engines with the search strings and the word phrases, you're not going to come up with it coming from anywhere else. So that's what I'm saying. You have to do that examination with whistleblowers and people of all kinds. Here is, this is relevant to para-investigators and true investigators. Mary Beth Tinning was a case in the late 80s. She is one of the most successful serial killers in existence. That's because she was a wonderful elderly grandmother who was killing infants and toddlers. She was killing them by smothering them and other methods. And she spent a long career of murdering little kids and little babies. And she was allowed to continue her activities for a long time because psychiatrists and doctors got a hold of her and said that she was a great expansion of the SIDS syndrome, sudden infant death syndrome. And that for some reason she was like a magnet for SIDS, and somehow she was creating SIDS wherever she went. It's hard to believe, but this is true. They even went to her trial and testified that this was true. When she was finally caught and she was finally brought to trial, the psychiatrists and the doctors were right there with her, giving her a defense. Well, no, they were saying it's medical and scientific. As a matter of fact, it's in all the science journals and all the medical journals to this day. As a matter of fact, they used her to create something called Van Munchausen's syndrome by proxy. She was the original to create that. So they were using her to create new scientific theories, and they defended her to the last moment until she was finally convicted. And she would have never, but this story is really about two state troopers, New York state troopers, who went to school with her. And when she was in the middle of her slaughter of killing babies, they went to school with her in high school. They knew her, and they knew she was nuts. And they knew that her whole, oh, another baby died around me. Oh, this is a tragedy. They knew this was all an act because they knew her. And so they came forward to the police authorities in her local, I think it was Schenectady, Albany. I was in the area at that time also. I was going to law school at that area. And she was, and they came forward and they said, we know this lady. She's not a sympathetic figure like you guys are saying. She is killing kids. That's what she's doing. And the higher-ups in the police authorities told those guys, you better shut up. You better stop saying bad things about her. She will sue you for slander. You'll get in big, big trouble, you guys. So you better stop it. And thank God they didn't stop it. They came back, and one of the things that they noticed, and this is paranormal, they noticed that she was very parallel to another very famous serial killer named Amelia Dyer from England, the most successful serial killer in England's history, UK's history. She was the most prolific. She's accused of murdering 400 infants in her care that we know about. And she existed, 100 years earlier in 1896. And one of the things that they noticed was that the troopers were able to predict Mary Beth Tinning's activities because of the things that Amelia Dyer had done before. As a matter of fact, and this is a really freaky thing, if you go and you look at the ads that Mary Beth Tinning would put in the newspaper to take care of kids, a lot of the wording was exactly parallel to the wording that Amelia Dyer had used 100 years earlier. It was almost the exact same wording. As a matter of fact, Mary Beth Tinning would refer to a respectable and a respectable husband who works in the medical industry and who is of great assistance during any times, any crisis that may come up. Amelia Dwyer actually had the exact same husband, apparently, and wrote about that in her ads. To bring your kids, I have a medical professional standing by in case anything happens. It was really odd, but they were actually able to predict the stuff that Mary Beth Tinning would do because of what Amelia Dwyer did. Mary Beth Tinning finally stopped calling the emergency room and calling doctors when the babies were dying. She would just let them die and just report it 2 days later. And that finally started happening. And that was finally her undoing, actually. But Amelia Dwyer had done the same thing. That's how she had finally been caught. Para-investigative process. Another case on studies in repeating patterns includes the Unabomber. The Unabomber, again, one of the most successful serial killers. Some of you who are of a certain age may recall the Unabomber. He was blowing people up in their homes and their offices from 1978 to 1995 without stopping, and he was never caught. And I'm gonna tell you guys a secret in case you want to become a serial killer. The only way to successfully be a serial killer is, it's a very simple secret. It's just to be truly random in picking your victims. That's all you got to do. And you can never be caught, because that's what the Unabomber literally used to take the yellow pages and the white pages and just go through it and say, okay, that's the person I'm going to blow up today. He would go, and then again, yellow pages, white pages. That's the person I'm going to blow up. So because of that, in the FBI, we were spinning around, chasing our tails like whirling dervishes for almost 20 years. And our bosses were telling us the victims can't truly be random. Keep investigating the backgrounds of the victims. You'll find some common bond there, and you'll be able to predict the next victim, and then you'll catch them. And so we did that for 20 years. We had stacks, and we had rooms full of documents about the victims and their background, their history, everything they had done. And we never were able to find any common bond because they were truly random. That's it. That's all you got to do. Well, yeah, they're only common, and that would not have helped us one bit at all. So anyway, my point is, finally, myself, some FBI agents, and some police officers, we finally started doing meditations on the identity of the Unabomber. Some of them, and I write about this in my book, The Para-Investigators. And some of us came up with different things. One guy came up with that the Unabomber was living in a cabin. Another guy came up with he believed it was somebody in a forest. Another guy came up with that the Unabomber was a woman. And it did turn out he did have some sexual identity things going on later, but that didn't help us either. But what did help us was that at the same time we were doing those meditations, the Unabomber's brother was also doing meditations. He happened to have a yoga school and a meditation school. And the Unabomber's brother, during one of his meditations, just got the clarity, he got the awakening that his brother was the Unabomber and that he had to turn him in. And so he did. He called the FBI and he said, my brother's the Unabomber, please come and investigate that. And then that's how we finally got the Unabomber. This is a story from the Para-Investigators. They actually put it in it's a great movie called You Are Why. Well, that one's not. Why we need true investigators, not fact finders, because we are living in the gaslight triangle. We are living in the gaslight triangle. It is a triangle made up of fake news, mainstream news, corporate news, which is, it's all fake, or it's all leading us down the wrong way. Government authority fakery, and establishment science, mainstream science, because they have so much authority. Because we're all taught that science and MDs and doctors, they gotta be looking out for us. They gotta be telling the truth. And they're actually not. The reason for the gaslight triangle is the globalist agenda against the Western world. These are the agenda items that will never go away. They will never stop. They will never, ever completely go away no matter what. Of course, the first one is depopulation, which includes legal, widespread, politicized abortion, endless wars, GMO foods, big pharma, depopulation. Again, these are not political realities, but unfortunately, the cabal, the elite powers in control, have conditioned us that these are political things when they're not. They're issues of human survival. They're issues of basic human rights. Number two, civilian disarmament. You gotta disarm a population before you can kill them. That's it. And that's what mass shootings which are composed as a political weapon against us. That's what that's about. Control of economies, debt slavery model, elimination of borders and all border defense, control by globalist elites directly over national citizens. And that is why it is necessary to have the Cuck investigative system. This is a system that was developed during the Soviet Union. It's completely inappropriate in a free society. Can't use this in a free society. But we're not living in that. We're living in a society that is Orwellian at this point. And is a global society, unfortunately. Its Cuck system, of course, is what we talked about in the presentation. It's cover story identified, usual suspects actions, connect and connect all clues that are dispositive. Strongest clues. The strongest things that don't happen except like every 100 years or once in a lifetime. That's a dispositive clue. A clue that is so strong, so heavy probative weight that it can decide guilt or innocence just by itself. That's a dispositive clue. And it's the Cuck investigative system, as in, don't be a cuck for the deep state. And you can apply it to any area of life, including politics or anything else. Under the Cuck investigative system, we can look at the democratic field of candidates. There's never been, in the history of politics, and I follow politics, I always have, but I'm also a historian, and I know that in American history, there's never been a field of candidates like this for president. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Half of them have criminal records, the other half have mental health records. And most of it is known. Most of it is known. That's the most amazing part. It just doesn't make sense that when they're going against a sitting president, they're going to put up a field, such a weak field. It doesn't make any sense. And the field, and the hilarious part, most hilarious part is the field is led by, my thing's not working anymore, by Joe Biden, the most unelectable guy I've ever seen. There are pictures of him in public groping little girls and women. It's not a secret. There's pictures everywhere and video of him groping, assaulting little girls and public. I couldn't say that unless it was true, but most of you probably know, I'm sure. And he's the most, and yet he's the front runner among all these guys. It's Joe Biden. It's insane. Now, here's the cover story here. This is just a regular field of Democratic candidates for president. These are serious, real candidates for the US presidency. That's the cover story. And there are some electable, plausible candidates who could win the nomination. That's part of the cover story. Usual suspects' actions, in this case, thousands of media outlets, all reporting the exact same cover story. They're lavishing worship on all of these candidates to make them seem like serious candidates. And Joe Biden is the front runner in this field of legless wonders. In a group of people with no legs, a one-legged man is king. That's what that goes back to. Now, here is a dispositive clue. For the first, and you guys can look this up, please trust but verify. Do your own research. For the first time in American history, a former sitting US president has refused to endorse his own vice president running for US president. This has never happened before. Obama has refused to endorse Biden, a guy he was sitting with for 8 years. For 8 years. That's called a strong clue, okay? The corporate media is not allowed to ask or even mention this extraordinary event. Folks, I'm not talking about like in the last 100 years. I'm talking about in the history of the United States. The 350 years history of the United States, this has never happened before, that a sitting president refuses to endorse his own vice president. You see? That's why this is such a strong clue. The corporate media is not allowed to ask about it. It obviously can't be incompetence, senility, or unfitness that precludes Obama from endorsing Biden. He supported Hillary. So obviously that has nothing to do with it. It doesn't. It can't. Well, the answer is he's saving his most important endorsement for someone else. Someone who's going to benefit from his endorsement to a higher degree than anyone else in the world. There's no electable or even viable person in the entire field. There just isn't. Oh, it's not working. Knowledge from the investigative conclusion. And don't read ahead at the end. There's only one person as closely associated to Obama as Biden. So that person would benefit most from his presidential endorsement. There is only one person that all the media, the Hollywood, and the usual suspects would unify behind so resolutely that they might have a chance against a sitting US president. Final conclusion. Epics, the elite powers in control, the Illuminati, their plan is for Michelle Obama at a later time to jump into the race and get the Democratic nomination for the United States president. That's the conclusion. I didn't say it would be easy. It's
Big Mike, by the way.
It's a little crazy. Say again?
She's Big Mike.
Big Mike? Yeah. That's even better for the cabal, because you think about all the bases they have covered by slapping Western civilization in the face by having Michelle Obama possibly be president. I mean, they'd have so many bases covered as far as insulting the United States, the way they did with Obama. It's just a win-win-win for them. So that's why this is the plan. I'm not asking if it's the plan. I'm telling you guys, this is the plan right now. Now, the thing is, with these cuck investigations, it doesn't absolutely mean it's going to happen, because there's the human factor. Because Michelle Obama she could chicken out. She could just say, "I'm sorry, I can't." And indeed, right now, she's saying, she's busy saying to everybody, "I'm not going to run for president. I'm never, ever, ever." But that's part of the process too. But later on, when the moment comes, she could lose her nerve. I did one of these investigations on Obama, and I did this with several other FBI agents, where Obama was actually having his officials run around and get custody of some devices that were supposed to be used in a false flag type of scenario against the United States. And when the time came for him, and so we had this all mapped out, that he was going to do this towards the end of his presidency, but he chickened out at the end. He just decided he wasn't going to do it. He didn't want to. And I'm sure he was punished by the cabal. I'm sure they were very mad at him, but it comes down to the human factor. Some of these plans, it takes a lot of courage to come forward and carry out the plans of the cabal. And I don't know if Michelle Obama will have the guts to do it when it finally comes down to it. But as of right now, she is going to do it. She is. So we'll see. We'll see what happens ultimately. So here's another case study under the Cuck investigative system. Worst mass shootings in American history. Here they are. Do you notice a trend with all of these shootings? They're going from the bottom up, from the bottom up. Do you notice how it's almost like what do you guys notice about the yeah, it's increasing exponentially as far as how many people get killed at these things. Now, anybody who's had experience with firearms, and I know there's a couple of you in here, you know, it's extremely difficult to make sure that you kill someone on the fly when you're with you got a weapon, and because you have to get the vital organs, and you have to do it the right way. And when you're in a wild, chaotic situation, it's very hard to do that, especially under this fake system that we're under, where everybody's a lone wolf. Remember those code words? Lone wolf. Everybody's a lone wolf. There's no organizations involved in this. There's no other perpetrators we have to hunt down. We don't have a reason to keep the police investigation open. It's a lone wolf. So now keep in mind, in this chart, every single person is a lone wolf. That means one person, one guy with all these guns. And yet, he's able to kill 49 people in a single incident, or 59 people in a single incident by himself.
The guy in Las Vegas, he had like an army militia up there in his hotel room. How the heck we can get that up there?
Yeah, especially when there's no, there's no video produced of any, the Las Vegas mass shooting.
They have videos
from,
of everything.
Yeah, there's videos of everything, so why wouldn't they produce a video of him lugging that ammunition into that room? The only answer is that he didn't do that. Say again? There are, it appears that all of these guys are some kind of MK Ultra products. MK Ultra, especially if you add to the fact that it appears that all of these mass shooters, they tend to disappear about a week or 10 days before the shooting happens. Nobody knows where they are. And so, for instance, Q tells us, who's probably the most reliable source of information today in this society, Q tells us that there are something called counselors that are involved with all of these mass shooters. Counselors who do something to develop these mass shooters, to cultivate them, to train them, and to probably hypnotize them into doing whatever that they do. So I believe that that's the case. Yes, sir.
They're also saying, too, that a couple of them never really happened, that it was fake news.
Yeah.
One of them in Connecticut, I think it was.
Yeah.
And the Las Vegas one, they showed us a bunch of final photographs on the TV, but the other people were saying that there were 3 helicopters circling around the area, they were shooting at the helicopters.
Right. But I tend to believe that when we see the information that something didn't happen, I tend to believe that's disinformation from the deep state, because they want us to be running around saying nothing happened, nobody got hurt, and then they can produce actors and people who may be real that are saying, you know, my kid died, how dare you? And so you want to stay away from that speculation as much as possible. Yes, sir.
Well, I'm just wondering, there were so many different departments involved in some of these investigations. Do you think that some have to be in on it, and some are not in on it?
Yeah.
Do you think that the cover would get thinner and thinner and thinner?
Yeah, well, I can tell you there's a very simple secret to that, and it's the same secret we saw during JFK assassination. And it's just that the heads of various agencies are always given the same orders by the elite powers in control, by the cabal, which is just, I want you guys during this period to stand down. Stand down. That's it. And that's what they make them do, that's what they tell them to do. And they could be giving them different reasons to stand down. And they could be doing it with threats, by paying them. Yes, sir.
There also the Virginia Tech massacre, all of a sudden there were no security guards around, and there was no dorm lockdowns or anything when he supposedly killed that first person.
Right.
No dorm lockdowns, no security, nothing.
Yeah. And so, yeah. So then it becomes a judgment call on your part, like, are they a part of it if all they did was just stand down, like the Secret Service during JFK? During the JFK assassination, they largely pulled back their forces and just stood down. And so that's usually the level of their involvement, because that way they don't have to be told the plans. They don't have to be in on the conspiracy, because that can create problems. But they usually carry out their orders to stand down. That's what I see. Yes, young lady. I think there was a lot more involved with the Epstein case. With the Epstein case, there was a lot more involved with that, because they had some blackouts, and I do a CUC investigation on that too, in my presentation that you missed. But I think with Epstein, the White Hats actually created some blackouts so that they could smuggle Epstein out, and I think he's alive and well right now. They smuggled somebody else in to pretend that it's him, and then they just got Epstein out, and I think he's alive and well, cooperating with authorities right now. The authorities that are working for us, that are on our side, that are trying to clean up the corruption in the Western world. So here's a cover story for mass shootings. Mass shootings are caused by guns. And here's the most ludicrous cover story you could ever come up with, and yet that's what it is, because it's in the newspapers, it's in the mainstream media. And here's some of their most successful incidences throughout the Western world. There's only about 4 countries left in the world. The world has like 220 nation states. There's only like about 3 or 4 countries left that have the right to bear arms. That's it. Just 4, and the United States is the only significant one that still has the right to bear arms. Here are the incidences that have occurred throughout the Western world that successfully shut down the right to bear arms in these countries. In the United Kingdom, it was in 1997, and all kinds of, they had huge mass shooting in schools throughout the UK. And as a result, 1997, they did all kinds, and 1988, they did all kinds of new legislation to make sure that nobody could have guns. New Zealand capitulated just in 2019 after the Christchurch shootings. Australia, it was in 1996. Canada, it was in 1999. And of course, this is an ongoing process, those of you. Yes, sir. Did you have something on that? Oh, this is an ongoing process, but this was the final nail in the coffin for citizens in those countries to bear arms. So these mass shootings were very successful, very successful. Usual suspects' actions, all MSN reports the exact same cover story. Collect and connect dispositive clues. Here's some dispositive clues. Mass shootings have no connection to legal gun owners. 97% of mass shootings are done by criminals with illegal guns. And 100% of mass shooters have a strong connection to big pharma drug abuse. And yet, nothing is pointed in that direction. Nothing. And mental illness issues. 100%. A fact the corporate media carefully avoids, shows command and control from Epic. Also, mass shootings in each of the Western nations seem to stop the moment that they outlaw guns in the hands of citizens. Okay? How can that be? How can that happen? Now, if you say that to somebody in the media, they'll say, that's great, it worked. It worked, making firearms illegal for citizens Now the mass shooting stopped. But if you force them to examine that a little closer, why would they have stopped? Criminals can still get guns. Criminals were doing the mass shootings. So why would the mass shooting stop? The moment that Australia passed the anti-gun acts as a result of one of these mass shootings, suddenly all the mass shootings never happened again. But it doesn't make sense because there's no connection with legal gun ownership and mass shootings. Also, the campaigns for legal gun confiscation are what we call preloaded campaigns. In other words, that's why the next day you always see the politicians, you see the media outlets saying we need gun control. It's because they're ready they've been told ahead of time. These are preloaded. Also, how can all mass shooters always exhibit the exact same qualities? They're always dressed in black. It's always a white male dressed in black with a duffel bag, a black nylon duffel bag full of guns and firearms. It's like they get printed, they get trained at the same factory. Yeah. It's like the uniform that they always have. And I know I had Jared Loughner in Tucson who shot the congresswoman. And it was the exact same uniform. He had the same uniform, the same little black nylon duffel bag filled with guns, and the same crazy look on his eyes. Yes,
Again, I marvel because I've been hearing this stuff so many years, but never this organized, and never this, like, all these different elements of different countries and all that kind of stuff. You think, like, there's enough people, if enough people were to understand this thing, the whole agenda would fall apart. And it doesn't seem to be, and it's, it's frustrating because it seems so thin, so, focused.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one of the problems with that, it's like the same thing that people say. I don't watch CNN for the same reason that I don't drink from the toilet. So people feel good when people say, "Oh, New York Times, their circulation is bottoming out. It's going to." Nobody's buying the New York Times. Nobody's watching CNN anymore. Oh, they're going to get canceled. They're going to get closed down. No, they're not, because they don't need to make money. CNN doesn't need to make money. New York Times doesn't need to make money. Why? Because they're funded by the globalists. The globalists have the central banks. They've got your money already. So CNN doesn't need to ever make a penny. Neither does the New York Times. Neither does neither does the Democratic Party.
You know, Starbucks coffee?
Yeah.
Every one of the locations, like something at New York Times.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even in the newspaper, there's based on the New York Times, they're proving it that one same paper, and it says for the white collar and for the worker man, it says one's for Trump and one's not for Trump.
Yeah.
And it shows what the shoe on the chain.
Yeah.
They're lying. It's bogus. One's to go for Trump, one's not.
Oh yeah. When I was, that's one of the reasons I had so much disdain for government higher up officials. Whenever I was in Washington, D.C., working with higher up government officials, they all had copies of the New York Times every morning that they were reading. They were reading it for information, like psychotic. And I never saw any real people throughout Washington, D.C. with the New York Times. They didn't read it, they didn't look at it, nobody did. But when you're around those government, because New York Times, it's for these elites, these East Coast elites, to be able to manipulate the rest of the population. It's just awful, and a lot of awful people find their own level. It's amazing. Yeah. So we have these campaigns that are preloaded. We have all of these dispositive clues about mass shooters, and it finally leads us to the final investigative conclusion. Mass shootings do not appear to be organic. Organic simply in the sense that naturally occurring. They're not. They're not naturally occurring. They are being composed. They are being put together. They are being artificially created. By who? By the cabal, by the elite powers in control, by the bad people who are seeking that agenda against us. Exactly. Non-organic means a plan and a pattern is being carried out. And due to all the exact repeating phrases, circumstances, conditions of all of these mass shootings, they are being composed. They're being carefully organized, executed events. And the final is only Epic or the cabal has the power and the power to cover up and the power to suppress anybody looking into this sort of thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Watching it. I said that a couple of months ago. My dad's a hardcore Republican. He laughed. And my sister, bleeding heart liberal, she got mad at me because how dare I say that people aren't really getting killed? I'm like, they are really getting killed, but there's an agenda to all this, and it's really disgusting. And I'm just and I'm waiting because I know it's coming.
You know, and they are really getting killed. But I do think that the cabal sometimes hires these actors with these fake identities to come forward in order to do the double trick on us as well.
Seems like the two states that have a lot of shootings are the two states with the most favorable gun laws, one being Florida, one being Texas.
Well, that's exactly what she was just talking about. It used to be in the blue states, in the Democrat states, where all the mass shootings were happening because they knew they would get support in those states for their anti-gun agenda, anti-American agenda.
Because New York and New Jersey are very anti-gun laws.
Right.
You can't.
Right.
Very hard to carry a pistol.
Right.
As a law-abiding citizen.
Which is completely illegal and completely unconstitutional. It's insane that they get away with that. But what she was noticing, that I also noticed too, is that now, only recently, the mass shootings are happening in the pro-gun states, like Texas. This is a very recent thing. They're now proceeding to all the right-wing states, which is of great concern to me in Arizona as well. So that's happening now. That's how confident they feel about their agenda. Again, agenda that will never go away. It will never stop because it is globalist in nature.
One last thing, I've known a couple of psychopaths. And one thing
So, you're in politics?
No. Yeah, close community. The thing that it seems like there's almost like the evidence is there to see through it, and they almost do it on purpose. It's kind of like somebody's serial killer. And there's so many clues that it's almost like with purpose they're being, I don't know. I mean, maybe that's whatever it is, but it just seems that the work of psychopaths, there is a certain pattern.
Well, one of the things that, and this is something that David Icke talks about a lot, and I believe it's true. One of the things about the cabal, the Illuminati, these controllers behind the scenes, the 12 bloodline, the 13 bloodlines that have been going on and on for thousands of years with the central banks, the central banking dynasties. One of the things about them is that they appear to have, at the top of their dynasties, they are demonic. They are demonic, and they are reptilian in nature, and they do not have creative imagination. They don't have creative imagination. And this is a thing that if you do religious studies, you'll see that this is the case. And so only those of us who are of the light have creative imagination, apparently. That's a real thing. And so what happens is they have these scripts that they follow, that have been scripts that have been going on for thousands of years. These things were being done in the Roman Empire by Nero. and by Caligula, and by all the terrible, all the worst elements of the Roman Empire. These things have been going on for thousands of years, and they can never really. So what you're calling like almost like leaving behind clues, like they want to get caught, it's not really that. It's just that they don't have a choice but to run the same scripts and stick with those scripts, and that has been the case, and that's why it's so easy to identify these things when they're happening, and to be able to point out, if you're a real investigator, you can actually look at this and see what's really happening. It's because they can't do anything new. They can't come up with anything new, and they won't. They won't. That's why they have to have control of the media, complete and total control of the media, because they can't do a new script. And that's exactly how they're being defeated now by the white hats and by the people who are in our favor, because they can accurately predict every single thing they're doing.
They also demonetize the YouTuber truth seekers that attack their false flag events.
Right. They have to do that. They have to be in control.
They really go like a real,
Right.
like a SWAT team, sanitize the information.
Right.
control the information.
Right. Because they can't change what they're doing. They can't do, okay, a new strategy, we're going to do something totally different. They can't. They have to use the same scripts. So,
They did something similar with in the Spygate thing that's coming up.
right.
They took the dossier 10 years ago, rewrote the thing sort of, and put it out there as what Trump was up for, some darn thing.
Exactly.
I mean, what's this? Dan Bongino.
Yeah.
He's like, he tells the whole story
Yeah.
about the 20 minutes. Like, holy shit.
And then the most evil of their minions, like Hillary and Obama, comes forward and they accuse the other guys, and this is such an ancient technique. They accuse the other guys of doing exactly what they were doing.
Right.
It's what they have been doing extensively. But if they can just project it onto the other person and say that person has been murdering people and colluding with Russians and doing this, and that, when that's exactly what they were doing. But that's, like I said, they can't. Were you going to? Q Phenomena is a military intelligence group that is surrounding Donald Trump and the presidency, who are putting out information that is not news. It is military intelligence, which is very different from news. And they are being used because we are in a global war. We are in a global war, which is not appropriate for news services anymore. It is only appropriate for military intelligence, which means they know their stuff is being watched by the other side and decoded and examined. And so for that reason, sometimes they have to use disinformation too. So sometimes Q will come out and tell us that, well, you know what? Something's going to happen against these DNC officials by January 22nd. And Q will put out that information. And the reason is because they're trying to force the cabal into doing something on January 21st. On June 21st, the day before. And the cabal does exactly that. They do exactly what Q wanted. Like they order a mass shooting on the 21st in order to distract from the arrest of all these DNC officials. You see, so that's military intelligence. It's something much more complex and much more useful than just news. And that's what Q does, and that's what Q is doing. Because Q is at the tip of the spear of the White House alliance that is currently trying to overthrow the central banks, the fossil fuel economy, and all of these things that have kept us in prison. And we have here Smarty John Mendez in the back. He's one of our authorities on Q. I would encourage you to also ask him any questions about Q, because it's a very profound topic and a very important. That's John Mendez right there. He's got the shirt that says source on it there. That's also very important for Q and for all of us. Yeah. So that's what that is, folks. And I think I am at the end of my time here. I will final polish and para-investigative skills. Always insist on proper law enforcement identification. I recognize lazy law enforcement.
It's everywhere. It's everywhere. That's why marijuana is still illegal somewhere, in some places, because lazy law enforcement loves enforcing those laws, so they don't have to confront violent criminals. Polygraphs are not an investigative tool. Polygraphs are a threat. That's all they are. They don't tell you if somebody's telling the truth or not. They absolutely don't. All they tell you is somebody's calm or isn't calm. That's all they do. Common sense. Your common sense is the strongest tool in resisting deception. And
one of the things I learned as an FBI agent is not that I learned to believe in conspiracies more. What I learned to know is when I am caught up in a river of deception and everybody else around me is being taken on the same current and we're all being taken in one direction, and suddenly one guy has to stick his head up and say, this isn't right. This is all wrong. We're all just being fed garbage and we're not being told the truth. Well, how is it that technology in today's age, our technology has moved forward by leaps and bounds in so many areas, yet we're still driving, the entire world is still driving automobiles that function essentially on the same technology that they have for 100 years. 100 years, and we're still using fossil fuels to fill up our gas tanks. How is that possible? That has not moved forward hardly one iota. I mean, they blend the stuff sometimes, but I mean, essentially, technology has been stuck for 100 years. Well, that's because that's one of the economic factors from the globalists that is so dead set against distributing real energy, which is free energy, which we know was discovered during Tesla's time.
You're living in a frozen society. And I can prove it. We've been living in a society that's been frozen for about 100 years. Since 1908, folks. This cannot be organic. Since 1908, when the first Model T Ford rolled off the assembly line, we are still using the same technology in all the basic areas of life that affect our quality of life. Nothing has moved forward. You got your plasma screens have gotten bigger, your certain computer chips have gotten smaller, but other than that, that's just nibbling around the edges. All the basic things have remained completely frozen, and it's unbelievable. Planes have not changed.
50, 60 years.
In essentially 100 years. It's exactly.
The seats got smaller.
Exactly. It's that, and that is what we need. How could we not have free energy yet? How could we not have free healing yet? Well, we are now at the point. And that was Above Majestic. I encourage everyone to pre-order Cosmic Secret, the next movie in Above Majestic series. It's coming out. It's going to be available very soon. And we talk more about this. Oh, and all the streaming services, Amazon and all the streaming services.
So that's available now?
Yeah, Above Majestic is, yeah. This was the #1 documentary in the country for several months. I think Laura was in it with me, Laura Eisenhower, and many, many other people as well. Do you have something else? And so we talk more about this. So again, guys, so like I said, yeah, Cosmic Secret is going to be available for pre-order very soon, and that's the next one in that series. And in the meantime, please visit my table where I have my books for sale, and I will have the sign up. If you want the PDF of this workshop, you give me your email, legible, very clear, write it very slowly and clearly so I can read it, and I will send you the PDF of this workshop so you can have it, and that way you don't have to just depend on your notes there, just in case they're a little scribbly. So that's it. That's what I got for you guys, and thank you very much.
Thanks for watching these presentations. This is John DeSouza signing off. For more information, go to johnthamabooks.com for more things that can help you in your everyday life, important things that will blow your mind.